Welcome back to the mainstream. John, the news keeps on coming. The good news keeps on coming. Our second favourite president has had a lot of electoral success.
You're talking not about our first favourite president.
No, I'm talking about it could be someone's favourite president. Some of our listeners probably.
Yes, Javier Milei in Argentina had a resounding success in the elections for a number of Senate seats and congressional seats. That he won 41% of the vote, which was a much higher proportion than had been predicted. It was hailed as a resounding success. The left-wing Peronos party got about 30%. And I love the line that he had after the election results came out. The Argentine people have decided to leave behind 100 years of decadence. Yeah, I always struggled with 100 years of solitude, but great news. And he still doesn't have a majority because only some of the seats were up for election, but he can cobble together a centre-right coalition. And this is a resounding vote of confidence in his economic and social reforms.
Wow. Well, that's good news. And I've got some good news, John. I found some polling.
About our first favourite president?
No, we can get to our first favourite president later. But I've picked up something that's fallen off the back of a bus, some polling that is the subject of debate this week.
Oh, is this the polling that everyone's been talking about but no one's allowed to see?
That's right. That's the one. And as you know, John, there's a very highly secretive closed-door meeting of coalition MPs in Canberra because you don't want to talk to actual people. They're just going to talk about this with the door closed about net zero. They're going to figure out their position on net zero this week.
After we've been talking about net zero for 10 years and Scott Morrison committed to it in 2021.
That's the one.
Okay.
That's the one.
What's in the secret polling?
Well, I found this secret polling and it's very interesting, John. So
who did it and how many people?
So this is by a polling firm called Compass. It's of 1,010 Australians in a representative sample that was undertaken this month. And there's a number of questions about net zero, and I'll just go through a couple of them because it builds on a lot of what we've been talking about. Now, the focus of the debate by the political class is in relation to this question. It says, which of the following statements best matches your view on Australia's zero emissions targets? They should be kept as they are, 33%. They should be changed to be more flexible, realistic and achievable goals, 52%. They should be scrapped entirely, 16%. Now, this is used by the net zero apologists to say, see, only 16% of people oppose net zero, double that support it, but the majority want some kind
you mean a compromise?
Some kind of compromise in the middle.
Let's have net zero, but not really targets. Let's have net zero, but it's not too expensive.
We'll do net. How about not net zero by 2050, but net zero by 2060?
Yeah, or what about changing the targets from 43% reduction from 2005 to 35% reduction?
35%.
Yeah.
That will cut through the community. So that's the question that's being asked. But when you actually dig into some of the results, it's very interesting. So I'll give you this one.
So again, to put that into context, so that's the number that has been selectively leaked out and briefed by net zero supporters in the coalition, saying, look, we need to do something.
We need to do something.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's another question here. Which of the following should be the highest priority for Australia's energy and climate policy? 15% cutting emissions as quickly as possible, 13% protecting jobs, 50% keeping electricity affordable for households, 9% ensuring energy independence, 12% encouraging new technology. So, John, all of this polling, all of the smartest brains in the country have figured out something that I don't think anyone ever knew. Australians want cheaper power.
Really?
This is just mind-blowing insights.
So after our power prices have effectively doubled over the last decade, and we've been told that power prices will come down with more renewable energy, Australians have finally woken up.
Well, prices for both electricity and gas, this is household bills, have gone up 40% since we signed up to net zero. And they're going to go up even.
And that's just in 4 years.
That's it's increased by almost half in 4 years. Now, this is...
No, but renewables are cheaper, Dan.
The bills say otherwise. Now, this is the really interesting one, and there is a four-letter word that starts with C that I've been told that Liberal members of Parliament are not allowed to say.
So Liberals don't like talking about culture. But that's 6 letters.
Yeah.
Go on.
So it only accounts for about half of our energy generation. Can you guess what the C word is that has 4 letters that they're not allowed to talk about? No. Coal. They're not allowed to say the C word. They're not allowed to talk about coal.
C-O-A-L.
C-O-A-L, coal. But it turns out
that's powered humanity.
It turns out, according to this polling, coal is more popular than net zero. Right? That's the key takeaway when you actually look at the results. So do you support increased use of Australia's coal and gas within Australia if it means lower electricity prices but delays our net zero goals? 55% say yes. Let's use more coal to get prices down and bugger the net zero goal. Like, it's almost as if we've been talking about this for 5 years, and the polling that's being used to support some kind of net zero target actually shows the opposite, that a far higher share of Australians support more coal to get prices down and get rid of net zero than those who support net zero. Isn't that the whole game?
This is completely contrary to what both major parties have been telling us for the last decade.
Yeah. Yep. But we'll see what comes out of it. But here's the other point, just to...
No, I'm going to pull you up on that.
Okay.
You're giving up too easily.
No, Liberals have dumped net zero.
No, but you'll say, we'll see what comes out of it. This is huge news.
It is. But it gets buried.
And you're hearing about it on the mainstream for the first time.
For the first time. But of course, the media will have access to this as well. And they don't write any of this up. They write up the only component of it that suits their preconceived agenda, which is to turn the Liberal Party into this weak Labor-like compromise party.
Which we'll come to in a moment. Is there any data on what would happen to support for the political parties if they dump net zero?
Well, this is a very good question. So we're told that net zero is very important. We're told that
the public want it.
They want action on climate change.
Albanese has a mandate.
It'd be an electoral disaster if they got rid of it.
They lose all the DLC,
now,
which they have.
Now, before we talk about the polling, we've actually had something better than polling, which are called elections. And we've had 2 of them. And at both those elections, the Liberal Party had the policy of net zero. And I don't think that worked out particularly well for them. In fact, they are at their lowest point ever since 1944. So that should be enough to tell you that net zero is a vote loser.
Maybe you should try a third time.
Maybe it could be third time lucky. But
maybe it could be third time oblivion.
Could be. Hi, thanks for watching the new podcast with John and myself. Hey, did you know that about 70% of those who watch this podcast are not yet subscribed to the IPA's YouTube channel? Do us a favour, hit subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of the action. And while you're at it, click the link on the screen to go to the Institute of Public Affairs website where you can sign up for the latest news and research from the IPA. Now, back to the chat. So if a political party promised to change or scrap Australia's current zero emissions targets, would you be more likely to vote for them, less likely to vote for them, or it won't affect my vote? 35% more likely, 27% less likely, 38% it won't affect my vote. So if the Liberal Party scraps it, there's a big net positive in terms of people saying they're going to back you.
So why won't they?
Why won't they? You tell me. I don't know. I don't get it. They're risk averse. They're too scared.
You were the candidate. You were the Liberal Party candidate, not me. I tried.
I don't know, John. I don't know. I don't get it. I think it is risk aversion. I think that too many Liberal Party members of Parliament take their cues from The Age and from the ABC and from the Sydney Morning Herald. They want to be invited to cocktail parties on Sydney Harbour. Some of them will be feather bedding jobs for when they leave Parliament in the renewables industry. Those are the explanations I have. I mean, it is just painstakingly obvious that having a strong policy to get rid of net zero and have a policy that simply reduces energy prices would not only be good for Australia, but is a vote winner.
So I hear all of that. In the defence of those who argue it's a bit more complicated than we make it out to be, and it's a bit more complicated than simple polling results that indicate that the public want net zero dropped or at least very substantially modified, as you've just identified, the media support it, the political class support it, the elite support it, big business supports it.
Yep.
This is like the Liberal Party attempting to have a discussion about industrial relations. They are a minority of Well, they think they are a minority of one. The point is they're not, because the public is on side. It's just that the public don't have a voice in this debate. But I've had NP say to me, of course net zero is ridiculous, and of course it's harming our competitiveness and driving businesses to the wall. But how are we going to convince the public? Because the media back it.
Yeah, but the media, I mean, there's only sections of the media back it, and they back it because you back it. I mean,
and the media backed the voice.
They did, yeah. And so we've had some articles recently in the in the Age and the Sydney Morning Herald that go to this very point.
Well, exactly, and this goes to the broader question about Australian politics of the leaders of both parties and the politicians of both parties catering to not their party members, not those who share their convictions, but some mythical centre that is defined by the left. And of course, there's no topic that upsets left-leaning liberals more than the Sky After Dark crew, because of course the so-called Sky After Dark audience, those who listen to Sky News and Peter Credlins and Paul Murray's and Andrew Bolt's and the Rita Panahys of the world, who care about Australia, who are invariably correct about their assessment of the future of the country, are claimed not to be where the Liberal Party should be aiming for. So it was a couple of days ago in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age, former Abbott and Turnbull government minister, big Turnbull supporter, George Brandis, who single-handedly torpedoed any reform to Section 18C when he said, well, freedom of speech is just about giving the right to bigots to say what they believe, which is completely wrong. But he said, in drawing parallels to the Liberal Party around Australia and to the Queensland Premier Crisafulli, he said Crisafulli is successful because he avoids being dragged into the echo chamber of Sky After Dark. This is the bit that I love from Brandis, which has nothing to say to modern Australia, except it was that audience, it was the audience who care about the country, who voted 60% no to being divided by race. And again, you can have a competition as to how many days goes by without Sky After Dark being attacked by someone else in the Age or the Sydney Morning Herald. And no sooner did Brandis write this than Peter Harcher, the political editor, again complained about the Sky After Dark crew not being able to accommodate the Liberal Party going to the centre ground, i.e. the left. So the centrifugal force in both coalition parties is their base. Their branch members, the Murdoch media, and especially Sky After Dark.
Supported net zero as well.
Yeah. Well,
to start with, and they had those 16-page wraparounds.
And we'll come to the Make More Things in Australia campaign in a moment. They represent a small minority of the electorate, but they are a key component of the coalition's structural support, and they're demanding that the coalition move not to the election-winning centre, but to the angry right of politics. So there's so much that's wrong with that analysis. It's hard to begin, but the point is that that audience is where Australia is at. That is modern Australia. Modern Australia rejects the voice. Modern Australia likes our country. Modern Australia likes coal.
Yep. They like lower prices.
They like lower prices
for energy.
And, this is the problem, as we've talked about many times, that too many coalition MPs listen to people who are not their friends. And, of course, if Peter Harcher was a sophisticated political analyst, then that would make a difference. But he's not, because, of course, in 2023, he said the voice would win.
Just like Kosomaris, the Labor pollster that everyone listens to.
I mean, that's one of the questions that I struggle with, which is why do Liberal MPs and their advisors spend so much time listening to people who don't like them, don't wish them well, and are not on their side?
Well, speaking of, and also speaking of misinformation, our favourite energy minister, Chris Bowen, gave a speech to
our friends at the CIS.
Our friends at the CIS. I'm yet to know what their position on net zero is, but I'm sure it'll come out just as soon as the Liberal Party's position comes out. But he gave an address to defend his position on climate and Labor's policies and so forth. And it was, as you've identified, it was full of just erroneous, factually false.
Well, I've been digging into the research for this episode, Dan, as you can tell. And yes, as you said, Chris Bowen gave a speech to the Centre for Independent Studies that got some publicity, basically saying that the coalition have to follow Labor's course on net zero. Two things that I want to focus on. One is his claim that 99% of scientists agree that climate change was human-induced. His quote was, 99% of peer-reviewed scientific literature found that climate change was human-induced. A true conservative would not and will not ignore the close to unanimous view of the world's scientists. So, science is not determined by consensus, as Einstein famously said. More importantly, this 99% figure is entirely bogus. There was a major research paper published in Climate that identified that figure was derived on a subjective basis, basically by excluding any paper that was defined or deemed as neutral. So the 99% figure is entirely made up. We have a Greens inquiry right now into so-called misinformation and disinformation on climate change. Okay, the Chris Bowen speech should be Exhibit A. Worse, and again, I don't know whether it's Bowen or his staff who pretend he can get away with other statements in the speech, such as this. Maybe Bowen was having a lend of the audience at the CIS when he said, some of the great names of conservatism are acknowledged as climate leaders of their time. None more so than Margaret Thatcher. I'm quoting direct. Thatcher was, of course, a scientist. She understood what is at stake. When we think of Thatcher's legacy, it is probably not an explosion in the membership of UK Friends of the Earth. And Bowen says, in 1998, she said at a famous Guildhall speech, for generations we have assumed that the efforts of mankind would leave the fundamental equilibrium of the world systems and atmosphere stable. That is not the case. We may have unwittingly begun a massive experiment with the system of this planet itself. And Bowen says, therefore, because of what Thatcher said in 1988, conservatives and the coalition, if only they were conservative, would support climate change. That's what he said about Thatcher. As far as I can tell from my extensive research, there was no debunking of his claims about what Thatcher said. There was no analysis that basically Bowen at best told a half-truth. There was nothing. It was completely accepted. The reality is, of course, that in 2002, in her book Statecraft Strategies for a Changing World, she basically rebutted everything she said. She apologised, she reneged. She said this. Bowen doesn't say this. The doomster's favourite subject today is climate. She said this 20 years ago. History hasn't changed. The doomster's favourite subject today is climate change. This has a number of attractions for them. First, the science is extremely obscure, so they cannot easily be proved wrong. Second, we all have ideas about the weather. Third, since clearly no plan to alter climate change could be considered on anything but a global scale, here we go. It provides a marvellous excuse for worldwide supranational socialism.
And that's what's happened.
And that's what happened. So where's the media? Where's Peter Hatcher? Where's George Brandis? Where's anyone attempting to follow this debate, saying they're engaged in the discussion, saying, well, all right, if we're going to talk about climate change and quote Margaret Thatcher, let's look at the evidence.
And as we've said before, this is why Labor loves net zero, because it's a vehicle for their economic control about, as we've said, that, you know, the car you can drive, the food you can eat, the houses you can live in, the lifestyle that we're allowed to have.
More broadly, it's the Labor Party, it's the Greens, it's the left. As Thatcher went on to say, that the climate change agenda is ugly, it is anti-growth, anti-capitalistic, anti-American.
Yep. And this is another reason.
But we like America when it's Biden or Obama.
Yeah. This is another reason why you cannot compromise on this issue, right? So Senator Patterson made a great observation about the risks of the Victorianisation of Australia, meaning that all of the problems in Victoria will metastasise to the country as a whole in the absence of effective opposition against what is quite a left-wing Labor government. But what we're actually seeing is the Victorianisation of the federal Liberal Party. And what I mean by that is they are now doing what the Victorian Liberal Party does, which is they find the single worst possible solution. See, with net zero, you either have to back it or sack it. Either support it, and if it's as popular as we're told, say, yep, we're going to go harder and faster than Labor, just like Zach Kirkup did in the Western Australian election. Why don't you try that? Or you get rid of it entirely and do something different. If you compromise, you will annoy people who like net zero and you'll annoy people who don't like net zero. Therefore, you will lose voters on both sides. And that's what happened at the last federal election. It also happened with migration policy, where Dutton said we're going to cut immigration, but not by much. So therefore, people who want you to cut it aren't happy, and people who don't want you to cut it are not happy. You've got to have an actual position on this. You cannot have a weak, centrist, weak-kneed, compromise position.
And if you don't have a position, you will be attacked as having a position by your opponents anyway. Another point from Brandis's article was when he said that the success of Crisafulli is because he eschews the culture wars which so obsess Liberals in other states.
Did he give any examples of other states?
No, hang on. So Tasmania Liberals support the Voice. New South Wales supported the Voice. Here in Victoria, the Liberals didn't like the treaty but weren't going to campaign against it. They were against the Voice but didn't campaign on it. No.
Western Australia, Basil is not that interested in culture wars or Australia Day.
Yeah, didn't he say something like he didn't mind if Australia Day gets moved?
Worse to that effect, something like that. South Australia, they oppose the Voice but won't campaign on it.
So what are these culture wars that Brandis is saying the Liberals are fighting?
Don't know. And just recently, the New South Wales Liberal leader said that he supports net zero. So what's Brandis on about? Is he just making things up? Surely he wouldn't just make something up without any evidence, would he? And surely the Sydney Morning Herald wouldn't publish something that has no substance to it. I can't imagine they'd do that. He must have some ideas. Maybe he'll come on the mainstream. But what we do have is a good debate happening in the Liberal Party that continues, and there's been two good interventions lately by two MPs, Henry Pike, who is the member for Bowen in the suburbs of Brisbane, and Garth Hamilton, who is the member for Groom, which is centred around Toowoomba, and both of them had articles in The Australian where they offer their perspective of where the party should go. So I want to just read you a couple of parts of Henry Pike's article, then we can have a bit of a chat about it. So what Henry basically argues here is that even if the Liberal Party wins back every single Teal seat, of which there are something like 8, then they still need 25 seats to get back into government. And as Henry correctly identifies, because apparently he's very good at arithmetic, that can only come from Labor electorates. Right, so this is a point that we've been making, which is you've actually got to win Labor voters to get back into government. Right, that's the only way that you can do it, and it's very important that we actually have a sitting MP say this, actually write it down and say it. And critically, what Henry says here is very important. We must speak to who they are, not just what they earn. The task is as much cultural as it is economic.
Oh, that's the 6-letter word that most Liberals don't talk about.
Cultural, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you should mention that, and it is hugely significant. And in the Age Politics podcast, Jackie Maley and Paul Sakal, they were talking to former IPA alumni Tim Wilson, member for Goldstein, who of course won a seat from the Teals. And Paul Sakal asked Tim Wilson a really important question. He said, why doesn't the left of the Liberal Party engage in a debate about culture? Why are they afraid to talk about it? And Tim gave a good answer. Basically, he said, I can't speak for others, but he was happy to engage in it, which is true. But whether it's coal or whether it's culture, Henry Pike has put his hand on the third rail.
Which is?
Politics and culture and the idea that a lot of Liberals are afraid to engage in basic themes. And I've talked about this a lot over the years when the first attempts of Labor censorship came in, first under Gillard, the Finkelstein inquiry, then there were various iterations of disinformation laws, which then the Morrison government turbocharged. The Liberals most Liberal MPs had no language, had no capacity to engage in a basic debate about why freedom of speech was important. And that's why Henry Pike is very much part of the future, not just of the coalition, but of leadership in this country. And it's significant that he's talking about culture.
Why is it that they don't have a language to talk about it? Is it because they're not versed in that way of thinking, or they don't have intellectual self-confidence? They don't believe in it.
I think that's the most sympathetic argument. And again, I've struggled with this for 20 years. The most sympathetic argument is they're not versed in it. They're managerial technocrats who can understand a spreadsheet but not much else.
Yeah.
A less sympathetic argument is, in fact, they're antithetical to a lot of those values. They are either they share the views that Australia, for example, is a hostile colonial state. They share the views that the West is guilty of all manner of sins. They share the views of the modern Marxist left, but because they believe in slightly lower taxes and maybe a little bit less regulation, and they understand that if ever Australia was defensively imperilled, we would need the United States, they fall in with the Liberal Party. They fall in with the Liberal Party, but I wouldn't put it any stronger than that. And at the minute, I'd argue about half the Liberal Party room has fallen in with the party itself.
So can the actual, I mean, my view is I just don't know whether you can hold a party together like that anymore. I mean, we've talked about the broad church idea. You know, I don't want to bang on about it too much, but it is now coming to a bit of a head. Like how can you have the same people in the party who believe in net zero with those who don't, who are passionate about our culture with those who are not, who
think we should make things.
Think we should make things, whereas those who like red cars versus those who don't. But how does that sort of? I mean, to me, it feels a lot different to the 1990s Liberal Party, where there were differences, but I mean, you'll probably have a better recollection than I do, but I know
there for some of it, yeah.
But I don't think that they were as significant differences of opinion as this. And I don't see how you can have a party that has, like with the Labor Party when they split, it was because, we don't like communism. You can't, they were actually believed, because there was a big difference of opinion. We don't want a centralized controlled economy being run by, heavily ideological left-wing leaders. And so they left the party. Isn't it sort of getting close to that?
Well, you put your finger on it. The split in the 50s was about something fundamental. It was about communism and therefore the direction of the country. The arguments between the wets and the dries were economic because the cultural standards and mores were still broadly accepted, whereas we are now coming to more fundamental fissures between the left and the right. And again, as we've talked about, there's a couple of things to this. I'm always struck that people say, well, the party has to be left. The Liberal Party has to be both conservative and liberal because Menzies wanted that way. But they forget the fact that Menzies was happy to engage in the destruction of the UAP to make something better. The other thing that's striking, and again, we'll take George Brandis as an easy, simple example. People like Angus Taylor and James Patterson from the right spend a lot of time talking about the Liberal Party must encompass the left. The left of the Liberal Party spend no time saying the Liberal Party must encompass the right. They spend their time attacking the base, attacking the membership, attacking people who are the mainstream modern Australians, 60% of Australians who voted no to the Voice. The left in the Liberal Party have got no interest at all in accommodating anyone who has a different opinion, which I think is a proxy for a bigger debate between, by and large, the centre-right is more open-minded and welcoming than the centre-left.
Or more naive.
Well, it's pretty cynical, Dan.
Well, but so this gets to a point that we've been talking a bit about, and is only going to continue, whatever the MPs decide on Friday in terms of net zero, which is, we hear about populism. We'll just take that.
Which, as John Gray said, is simply a term that the left uses for anything they don't like.
Yeah. But, so there are some who think our way, who go, well, we've had the US and the UK, we're going to have that kind of populism come to Australia. But you've also got to remember that countries like Canada and New Zealand, which are probably more similar to us in terms of our political culture, have not had this
That's right.
happen. And that's where Australia is. I think Australia is more similar to Canada and New Zealand than we are to the UK or the US for a range of...
So that's the left-wing argument that populism will never succeed in Australia, and we just go down the technocratic managerial path until...
Well, I think that's likely to happen. I don't think that's a good thing.
Until the centre-right gets taken over.
By
something
the left
else.
or the right.
By Andrew Hastie leading One Nation.
Oh, say that again. That's a big one. What prompted you to say that?
Maybe it was our conversation 5 minutes before this podcast started, Dad. when we were picking our fantasy political teams.
Well, this is important. So Pauline Hanson has changed the name of One Nation to remove her name. So currently,
no longer FON, or won't be FON?
No, yeah. So it was on the ballot. It's called Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Yeah. Obviously, a big part of that is people know Pauline, and so she has a fairly decent personal vote, brings people to the party. I mean, the people who love her absolutely love her.
Including the Nationals branch in central New South Wales has just gone over holus bolus to One Nation,
people who don't like her, right? So it gives a decent floor but a low ceiling, arguably. And it's always struggled to build outside of Queensland. And I was having a look at this in the 1998 Queensland state election. So I think Pauline was elected federally 96 to the seat of Oxley.
As a disendorsed Liberal candidate?
Technically an independent, but she was still on the ballot. Was she still on the ballot with Liberal or just her name? I can't remember. I have to have a look at that. But anyway, so this is when One Nation was at its highest point. 1998 Queensland state election. So Labor got 39% of the primary vote. One Nation 23%, Liberal 16, National 15. My favourite one, Greens 2%. In terms of seats, 44 for Labor, 11 for One Nation, 9 for Liberal, 23 for National, 0 for the Greens. So close to a quarter of the primary vote is a big deal. If they were to get somewhere near a quarter of the primary vote nationally, that would probably be the end of the Liberal Party.
Nationally, they're what, 13, 14%?
12, 14. But for some reason, they always underperform. I don't quite know why. The polls have them higher, but they're always a couple of points lower. Where I was running...
Crazy candidates could be one of the explanations?
I don't know. But where I was running in Spence, I had the polling and the primary vote was challenging mine. I think they were polling at about 15 or 16, and I think he ended up at 10. But the Trump...
I think I met him on the booth, no?
The actual guy, Daryl Booth.
Yeah, good guy, yeah.
He was an all right bloke.
Yeah.
But the Trump of the Patriots got 6. So you could argue if the Trump of the Patriots weren't running...
All that vote would have gone to you.
Well, I got a lot of the...
second preferences.
My primary tanked, but the 2PP put up. So I got a lot of the Trumpets' second vote.
So cast your mind
my point,
5 years to Pauline Hanson has retired.
Yeah. So who would the leader be of One Nation? Could be Barnaby. We could talk about that. But if you had a Liberal MP, someone who has the profile, as you've suggested, of Andrew Hastie, someone who would then lead One Nation, that could conceivably get them to about a quarter of the primary vote. And that would be the way in which some of this populism would manifest in our political system, I think. I think that's the only...
But as others have pointed out, our compulsory system of voting with compulsory preferential voting would just mean that the preferences of One Nation would just go to elect left-wing Liberal MPs.
Possibly. Yeah. But as the 98 state election shows, 23% primary still got 11 seats. So that's not a bad return. That's lower. I mean, Liberals got 16%, primary still got 9 seats, so they obviously benefited more from the preferencing. But, that would shake it up.
So all of this says to me we're living in, this is a curse, exciting times. We are seeing a debate on the centre-right for the first time since John Howard as to what the centre-right political parties stand for. And those Liberal MPs saying, the navel gazing has to end because we had an election 6 months ago. No, the coalition was smashed. As you've identified, it had its lowest proportion of the vote ever. The two-party system is straining. And we're saying we now stop talking about it and go back to politics as usual. This is not what the people want. And if what the people want is populism, call me a populist anyway. What the people want is coal.
Yeah.
What the people want is banning the Australian flag.
From being burned.
From being
They
burned.
don't want to ban the flag. They definitely don't want that. They want
Yeah.
banning the flag being burned.
But, and this
That's
is,
good.
there's too many MPs talking about business as usual, business that's made them comfortable, business that means you spend a few years in government, especially if you're the Liberal Party, you do nothing. The Labor Party comes in, they do a lot. You unwind some of their changes marginally. You enjoy the superannuation benefits of being a minister, and then you're out in opposition again. No, that is absolutely changing, and the ground is shifting beneath them. And as you often talked about, if the Liberal Party doesn't change, it'll get changed for it.
Yeah. You do realise, John, if you want to be a true populist, you're going to have to get behind the banning of burning the flag.
No, never.
You're going to have to.
No, I'm not going to. And because I think people also understand that the right to express an opinion, even if it's something pretty disgusting like burning the Australian flag, is too important to be let go.
That's a fair point. So I mentioned Garth Hamilton. I want to put a couple of quotes to you. I think his piece was very provocative. So what Garth argued in his article is, for the first time in modern history, the unions are not the natural enemy of the centre-right of politics. He argues that unions, you might say union workers, are aligned with us, Liberal Party, those on the right, on issues of mass migration and net zero, and that the impact of these two issues on our economy far outweighs the negative impact of union overreach. It's very interesting and provocative. I agree with a part of it. I think that obviously net zero and mass migration are anti-worker. Net zero is destroying jobs, pushing up bills for working families. Mass migration suppresses wages and deprives Australians of the first crack at a job. So obviously that's the case. The unions have always, throughout our history, been the most anti-immigrant force in our society all the way up until the 1980s. And that's only changed over recent times. So I think that's very, very true. I'm not sure I quite agree fully with the part about union overreach. I mean, that is really clobbering small businesses.
Well, it's the leadership of unions that is overreaching, and I think one of the things that Trump and Vance understood this difference, the difference between the membership and the leadership of the union, and of course they had union leaders at the Republican National Convention. It was the head of the Teamsters,
I believe so.
I think, who spoke, and union members are ripe for being spoken to, not as union members or Labor voters, but as mainstream Australians. And I think that's the point that Garth Hamilton is making. And you can talk to union members about their jobs and about their commitment to Australia and their families and good jobs for their children, while also pointing out that things like the union push to basically eliminate junior wage rates will decimate jobs for union members' children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and now we've just spoken about my friend Tim Wilson. Tim Wilson, as Coalition IR spokesperson, I think does understand this, and I think Liberals have been too afraid, well, for sensible reasons, because they've usually discussed IR changes in terms of productivity, in terms of working harder, in terms of efficiency, which are all the things to guarantee you to vote Labor. But I think someone like Tim Wilson can have a discussion about, well, okay, if we're talking about jobs for young people, then an 18-year-old getting the same wage as a 45-year-old with the difference in experience is going to cost jobs and cost the experience of work, is going to cost them the dignity of work. And that's exciting about what people like Garth Hamilton and Henry Pike are saying. And I'm really pleased both of them and others haven't fallen into this trap, which is it's business as usual. Let's not talk about ourselves. Let's not talk about where we've gone wrong. Let's not talk about what we believe. Let's just go back to, asking questions in question time that no one pays any attention to anyway, and most of the time are ridiculous.
Yeah. Plus, I think pretty much all the union leaders, other than John Setka, supported the voice to Parliament.
Exactly. They don't represent mates.
Yeah, all out there supporting voice to Parliament. There was something about the protests. He knocked back protests with the COVID protests and things like that. So
I wrote about that. Was one of my I still get I still get comments. I don't know how I do, but I've got some friends who are CFMEU members, and I still get comments about it because I wrote about.
There's some IPA members who are CFMEU members.
I hope so.
There are.
And I wrote about the fact that CFMEU members, let's say workers on building sites, want to work. They're working as far as they can, safely. They don't want to have mandates imposed upon them. Lockdowns and mandates were costing jobs, costing livelihoods, and the union leadership here in Victoria simply just followed Dan Andrews down the garden path. And some of the strongest protests against totalitarianism were those CFMEU protests. And you watch the videos, like, for example, our friend Avi Yemeni or others, and so many of them, this was commented on the time, of Eastern European backgrounds. They'd come, or their parents came, from totalitarian, authoritarian regimes for freedom, and now they get Dan Andrews imposed upon them. And you might be a CFMEU member or you might not be, but you know when something isn't right.
Yeah, they all threw bottles at Setka, when did they?
Yeah, no, we're not going to endorse corruption. We're not going to endorse bottle throwing, and we are certainly going to acknowledge that, again, here in Victoria, it's quite clear the Andrews and Allen government knew about deep-seated, widespread corruption for years, costing Victorian taxpayers billions of dollars, and because of the connections between the CFMEU leadership and the Labor Party, nothing has been done.
Well, let's go to your favourite segment, which is what you've been watching, listening to.
It's not a book that I can wave today. I can pull out my phone
You've
and show you what I've been listening to, but it's been great.
You told us that you've listened to 1 or 2 Joe Rogan episodes. Now you listen to 3.
So I listened
to Trump.
Yeah, Trump. Brendan O'Neill, our great friend from Spiked in the UK, was on Rogan, I think, last year. Whenever Jordan
Peterson
is on, I listen.
Jordo.
When he's out from treatment, I listen to him. But a very recent podcast, I think about a week ago, had Joe Rogan talking to 2 great scientists, both friends of the IPA. Dick Lindzen has appeared in IPA publications, and a few years ago, the IPA brought to Australia Professor Will Happer. So Will Happer is a physicist. Was a professor at Princeton, and Dick Lindzen would be the leading atmospheric scientist in the world, professor at MIT. And this reveals how much the world has changed. So Rogan was talking to them about things that until a few years ago couldn't have been talked about. So Rogan said, look, explain to me, you 2 very eminent scientists, explain to me the science of climate change. And they talked to him about the fact that there's a whole host of uncertainties, that nothing is definite in the world of climate change. And as Dick Lindzen talked about, science is a process. Science doesn't teach you wisdom, and science is about questioning the whole time. Then Rogan, in his manner, then said, well, what explains, and he called it the hysteria that we're seeing. And they said, well, there's a few things going on. Interestingly, and these are 2 scientists, they said the decline of religion. The decline of religion has meant that people must seek a purpose, and they seek a purpose in trying to save the world. They then talked about the corruption of science. They talked about the influence of money. They talked about, and this is how Bowen can say we've got 99% of peer-reviewed articles support climate change. Well, and Dick Lindzen talked about the cancellation in prestigious scientific magazines of any debate about climate change, and we've seen that in Australia. So the Conversation, I think it was about 10 years ago, funded by Australian universities, famously said, it's a website that publishes academic articles, they said, we will have no discussion about anything that challenges climate change. And then they talked about the role of universities, because Rogan said, well, you've got all these professors, you've got all these very bright people supporting things like net zero. And as both Happer and Linson talked about, the record of universities throughout history when it comes to moral causes is not great. And there was a really interesting discussion about eugenics and the role of universities in pursuing eugenics. Dick Linson talked about something Neil Ferguson has written about, which is, of course, the record of higher education in Germany in the 1930s. And it was just a wonderful, erudite, engaging discussion by two people who are retired, who don't need to defend their jobs, who have freedom to speak, who love science, who are gifted scientists, who are great communicators, talking about what has happened, not just to climate change and the science around it, but to science in general, to the education system. The whole podcast, it's not as long as the Trump podcast. It's about an hour, 40 minutes.
It's quite a short one.
It's a short one. They covered a lot of information and a really worthwhile conversation. So I'm almost thinking of sending a transcript to all of those Liberal MPs meeting in secret in Canberra this week, talking about net zero and saying, look, before you decide anything, just have a read as to what these two very distinguished, thoughtful, engaging scientists say about what you'll be deciding on.
Yeah. Well, it's an example of how we said before that the truth wins out eventually. And the actual frequency of discussion of climate change in the media has dropped a lot. We were talking before about in the US how there are fewer references to this. There was an article a little while ago also about ESG and how that's,
What's that? Is that like DEI?
Environment, sustainability and governance.
I do know.
Yeah. I always forget. But I never understood what the governance thing was about. It was HR.
No, that was just more red tape.
Yeah,
more red tape and more corporate advisors telling you what to do and not do.
Yeah, so that's dropping off.
But
the public's getting over this.
This is the significance of someone like Rogan engaged in this debate, and at the same time as people are wanting to talk about the science and the fundamentals of science universities and climate change and research, the implications or the policy consequences of climate change, people are actually far less interested in. And you mentioned the prevalence of climate change discussion in America. So last week a piece came out in the left-wing journal from the States, Mother Jones, and they were talking about a couple of surveys done. And they point out, this is in the US, media coverage of the topic, climate change, has dropped roughly half since 2023. And then polling has found that compared to previous years, Americans say they are hearing less about climate change in the news on social media and from the people they know. Maybe Americans, like Australians, soon will be coming to their own conclusions.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what the Liberal Party decides on Friday, John, whether we have net zero by 2050 or 2060.
Whether we have a Liberal Party by 2050 or 2060.
All right, well, we'll leave it there and catch up in a fortnight.